That's how it is.
Yeah. Well,
All
that
right.
sucks.
Well, you
Hopefully
want to do the introduction?
No, you do it. You're the man of this show. You're the leader.
Okay. Well,
You're the leader.
you booked the guests, so
I booked
you know.
all these guests.
Yeah, exactly.
I did, because I absolutely love them.
Well, welcome everybody to Beyond I Do. Welcome to the show today. We have, as always, a special one, but today is extra special because we have Betsy Elliott, which if you didn't know, that is my wife's maiden name. This is her mom on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thanks
having
for
me.
coming.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I know we wanted to talk about different subjects and topics, obviously, as being beyond I do and what that may look like. So we obviously, you guys know, and if you're listening, you're hearing my mom. And I'll have my mom share because it's a special week, but yet a hard week. As normally we would have, obviously the other special guest would have been my father, but my father passed away coming up on March 21st this week, 5 years ago from colon cancer. So Mom, share your background, your story, how you and Dad met, what that looked like, and we'll get into it.
All right. Well, it's interesting because this podcast is called Beyond I Do. And often when I would think about it, I'm like, I'm the one that's really beyond I do. I understand that you made the podcast with regards to beyond the vows and what it means to have a great marriage. But then I feel like I'm like beyond I do as well, because now it's really beyond the beyond.
Yeah.
So your dad and I met in high school. I was a cheerleader. He was on the basketball team. I was 15. He was 16. And he was 2 years ahead of me in school, but then ended up, once he graduated, joining the Army. So I graduated a year early from high school because I was young and in love and thought, no point staying here. Let's get done with high school, and then ran away to get married. And pretty much did that, ran away.
Yeah.
My parents had moved to California, and so I went for a few months, but it was always on my mind. I got to get to Texas where your dad, who was my boyfriend at the time, was. And so we got married. I was 18, he was 19. And then we were blessed with you and, well, your brother first, and then you, and then Allie. And then he passed away on our 39th wedding anniversary, which is very, very interesting that he would wait till that day, I guess, because he had battled the cancer for 7 years. But
Right.
I think, sometimes it's important to people to, it's like if somebody says, the person passed away after all the children had showed up or after they had met with somebody, and so I kind of feel like your dad was holding on to get to that 39th anniversary, and I'm thankful for it, so.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we were fortunate to raise you and your sister and your brother. We didn't come to Jesus until we were married for 10 years, and so then life kind of changed for the better after that, for sure, because, with marriage, it's hard. And, when we were married all those years, too, we would have people come to us over the years, especially after you have 25 years in or 30 years, and people ask, well, what's the secret? What's the secret? And the first thing I would always say is much prayer.
Yeah.
Much prayer to get to, any length in your marriage is going to require prayer,
Yeah.
You're one.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. And we didn't know Jesus at first, so we definitely struggled the first 10 years. But after we came to Christ, then just so that people know, we weren't perfect by any means, even after we came to Christ. And so we went to marriage counseling even twice after coming to Christ. But we had informed you guys, like, Mom and Dad are going, we're going to counseling, but this isn't for you guys to be insecure in any way.
Yeah.
It's so that you know that we care enough about each other and about our marriage and about you guys that we need a tune-up. We need to do this. So that's one thing that, I tell people, much prayer. And then the other thing is that love is a choice, that if you think that I felt like loving your father all those years, you knew him, and you knew him.
Yeah.
And you guys know me.
Yeah.
Right? So you think he wanted to love me all the time, but he chose to love me, and I chose to love him. And then in our marriage, too, once we came to Jesus, we said, divorce was not an option. So we didn't even want to say the word ever. So I always tell young couples, don't even threaten it, because when you threaten divorce, then that brings insecurity in your marriage. And then eventually the person that keeps threatening divorce has to become a person of their word and go through with it. And so better never to even mention it than to, throw that out. So
That's great.
and I think that, the other things that were a blessing to your dad and I is at one point we made prayer together important. So before your dad would leave for work, we had a couples devotional. And so, like, I would read the devotional and then he would pray. Or he would read the devotional and I would pray. And so that was kind of a blessing, a way to start our day and keep us going,
That's
so,
great.
Yeah.
And so maybe, this is on video, but a lot of people listen on audio. So for context, Betsy's white and Tom, Ashley's dad, was black. And
Right.
a lot of people meet Ashley and think that she's exotic and all this. And I guess white and black is exotic, but they always
Pretty
ask
simple.
her, oh, what are you mixed with? And she goes like white and black. And they're like, oh, I thought something more. But I think because of her unique last name now, is
That's exactly what it is.
what they think now. But for that context, so interracial, couple
Right.
growing up in the, early 70s, like in Chicago, like that's
Right.
not the most well looked upon relationship, right? Even to the point, I mean, I know there was conflict in your own community with you guys together, but also, if I remember correctly, like when Tom was in the Army and you guys went to marry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Christian pastor refused to marry you guys, right?
Yes, that's true. So my husband and I didn't really, we snuck around in high school. So we weren't like open dating couple. Like people, our age, they assumed, and our close friends, of course, knew because they were the other ones that we were, sneaking out with. But once we got married, my parents, nobody was at our wedding from our family. So nobody from my family or my husband's side was at our wedding. And we didn't invite any of them because we knew that it wasn't accepted at that time from the family.
Yeah.
So it was just military friends that were there. But yes, what you said is correct. We were at Fort Hood, Texas, and the chaplain that was supposed to marry us, I had agreed to it and then called us in a couple of days before the wedding and said, you know what, I've never married an interracial couple before, and so I'm going to back out because I don't want to do that. And so we were kind of blown away, and I wish, 39 years later, we could have caught up with that guy and go, look, dude, we made it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because so many other couples don't,
Yeah.
I mean, even as far as high school friends that married, local kids that we all grew up with, their marriages all didn't make it. And, so we were very, very fortunate. Yeah.
Wow. So who ended up marrying you guys?
So they had a black chaplain step in, and he married us. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. And, it was at the regular church that was there at Fort Hood and stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
turned out
I
great.
know my, father-in-law pretty well, that he has a little bit of a temper on him in life. Like,
Yeah.
was he hot around that,
I
or
don't
was he
think
just like
so.
whatever?
Yeah, I think we kind of just we
Really?
blew it off. Yeah, which is odd, right?
Yeah.
But I think he was he was more concerned about just getting the marriage, done. And who did it? It didn't matter. Kind of like your baptism story. Whoever's going to baptize you, this isn't about him. It was about us.
Yeah.
So yeah. So.
Well, then I don't think I know this. So then when did you tell Graham and Pop that you got married?
It was sometime later. I think I lied about being married. I, even had a passport because I ended up going to Germany where your dad was, and I had to have a passport with my current name on it then.
Yeah.
And so then I told some kind of story. So that was the, really difficult part for me because I didn't like lying. I didn't like going behind my parents' back, and I kind of felt like most of my life I had shared that I was, raised in the Catholic faith. So I tried to be the best, what I thought was good.
But you're one of 11.
Right. So my mom and dad had 11 children in 17 years.
Jeez.
So they had 6 girls and 5 boys. And I'm very, very blessed because it's interesting. The baby that was born before me, he died when he was 2 weeks old. And so it was pretty traumatic for my mom, of course, and my dad, and, you know, my older siblings. And so I didn't learn this until probably maybe less than 10 years ago. One of my brothers, who was about in second grade at the time, he said that when I was born, him and my oldest sister would run home from school, you know, once the bus dropped them off, and they would get to my crib, and they would just be like this over the crib, watching me sleep, watching my head go up and down, watching me breathe. You know how in a newborn baby you can see the top of their head breathe? And so I was smothered in love because I was baby number 9. So there's only 2 younger.
Yeah.
So after baby number 8 passed away, which was my brother Junior, then I was born. And so I was just smothered in love, and I have always felt loved. So, you know, it's interesting when I hear about people that didn't have that kind of upbringing. You know, like when I coughed, when I sneezed, they took me to the doctor. Anything I wanted, they gave me because, you know, there was this kind of like, now we would call it like PTSD from losing the baby or losing your sibling, you know. And so all of that got poured into me, which is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing, you know, as an adult now to realize, oh, that's why I've never really been insecure about anything. That's why I've never felt like I lacked love in my life, you know. And then, of course, finding my husband at such a young age and being with him, you know, for 39 years, actually, you know, 42 years, because we were together 3 years before we got married. So it's really great. And then now even to look back at my husband's situation, which was different, where he didn't know his biological father and didn't meet him till he was 51 years old. And so because of that, he had maybe some abandonment issues that he had dealt with, or insecurities because he didn't have his biological father there to watch him play sports, or, you know, and you don't even realize it as a young couple. I didn't know, you know what I mean? Like there were probably a lot of things that I could have done better and should have done better to try and help him heal from those things. And maybe that's why he was so fiery, you know what I mean? He was like, you know, trying to, you know, just be seen and to be heard. And, you know, and I think that part was maybe difficult as well with regards to being in an interracial couple, because most people didn't bother us. Your dad was 6'5". I mean, you know, I'm 5'2", so it wasn't like, you know, anybody was really going to come up at him, you know, and try and, you know, mess with him. Yet at the same time, there were times where he felt like people definitely looked to me, you know, and he'd be like, I'm here too, you know what I mean? Where people would pretty much, you know, serve me first, or, you know, what can I help you with? And he's like, you know, I'm not invisible here. And I think, you know, we didn't have any real confrontations. One time in a restaurant, somebody, you know, kind of confronted my husband, or actually my husband saw him looking at him strange, and so my husband confronted him. But now that the story's true here, okay, let's see who did what. But but that didn't amount to anything. I knew the people that worked there. The manager came out and kicked the other guy out of the restaurant. But I recall when we were newly married, maybe we had Anthony and Ashley, maybe we didn't. We were traveling, and back then you couldn't get a hotel room online. There, you know, we didn't have cell phones, you know, and so you had to go to the hotel, and it would say vacancy, and if there was no vacancy, the flashing sign would say no, right? And you know, at night. And so we went to a hotel, and he went to get a room, and it didn't say no vacancy. It said vacancy. But when he went up to the counter, they said, we don't have a room. Now, I was in the car at the time, and so he came back and they said that they don't have any rooms left. And I'm like, what? I said, it doesn't say no vacancy. So I said, I'll be right back. So I go in there, and sure enough, they gave me a room.
Wow.
And so from that time on, and it's sad for me to say this, but from that time on, I would tell him and the kids, stay in the car. Mommy's going to go in and get the room. You know what I mean? And so then I'd come back, oh, we got a room. You know, but then I'd be like, you kind of have to walk past the front desk. So we're going to walk really quickly to get to the elevator. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't want any problems for him or for them. But I think that, I'm glad now you can get your room online.
I think,
exactly.
I think I've told you that story, that my dad had never checked us into a hotel.
Yeah.
And then, so I want you to share, what were your thoughts now that you're married with Dad, knowing that Grandma and Pop weren't so happy with the relationship?
That was really hard because, like I said, I feel
like, what would you do? Like, how did you defend Dad, and what did that look like? Because there's a lot of people and a lot of viewers and a lot of listeners that are in relationships that some parents may not even just like the background of somebody that a person's in marrying, or their family or their lifestyle. And what was something that you did as a wife to protect your husband and to vouch for him to your parents?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to say this is my parents were not racist people. My parents loved me, and they were concerned about me. And so they were worried that I would be
You're just picking a life of hardship at that point,
absolutely.
like an uphill battle. And it's like, that's what we don't want for our daughter. Like,
exactly. And then even, back then people would say, well, what about the children? Nobody's going to accept them, know? And so that was a concern of theirs. And then I remember one time there was a terrible story, and I believe it was out of Texas, where there was a black man who was actually like chained up to the back of a pickup truck and drug, to death. And my mom said to me, if you weren't in this relationship, I wouldn't have to think about this story, And she wasn't trying to be insensitive to the story, but it was close to home now. It was really close to home. And so now she would look at stories differently, where people might have been attacked or people might have been, called out just because of their race. So, but with regards to, your grandma and your papa, I mean, I think that they really kind of thought that as long as I didn't have children, that maybe I would change my mind with regards to my love for your dad. And then once your brother was born, they were like, okay, this is what it is. You know what I mean? Because people have skeletons in their closet all the time, right? So if your dad and I didn't make it, because I was still so young, and I got married at 18, and I don't even know if they knew I was married at 18, maybe till 19 or almost 20, and then Anthony was born when I was 21. So there were a lot of years there between 15, 16, and 21 where, young love, or you could have just, changed your mind with regards to it. So, but once Anthony was born, they really changed so much. And they were, I think the first time I brought Anthony home, your dad was doing a trip to Korea. They had a 30-day, travel that they had to do with the Army. And so I went to Huntington Beach, where, your grandparents were living, and they just fell in love with Anthony so fast. It was, pretty awesome. And then, once they really did get to know your dad, then it was beautiful.
We say he was favorite, but
well, he would say he was the black sheep favorite.
Exactly.
He enjoyed my mom so much, and my dad, but him and my mom had a special connection where they'd, put a towel down on the table late at night and roll dice and play Yahtzee, but they couldn't do it on the regular table. It would make too much noise. And so,
funny.
they did. They really cared about each other a lot. And, I have old videos even of Anthony maybe at 3 years old, because by then, I think we had already moved to California, but they had moved back to Chicago, the Chicago area, Indiana, and become snowbirds. So, but we have, videos of them coming and going to SeaWorld, and Anthony was probably like 3 years old, and, just doing family things then.
So there was never a point where you had to fight for Dad with Grandma and Pop?
I think not. I mean, I think that by the time, your brother was born, then they said, this is the life that she's chosen, and we're going to
We want to be a part of it.
We want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
We're going to love our daughter. And they never stopped loving me.
Yeah.
I mean, even, when I ran away, and I guess that's another thing that I think about. So often people use the word boundaries, and I'm not a huge fan of boundaries. I understand that, it's necessary in certain situations, but I was thinking about the prodigal son. Suppose when the prodigal son, who got his inheritance, left, did all kinds of craziness, and when he was coming back, there was a big old boundary around the property. Everybody can come in but you. Jesus wasn't like that. I mean, so I don't know. I just think that, thank God that my parents didn't have boundaries and say, well, she's made this decision and it's not what we wanted, and so she can kick rocks and we'll see you when we see you. It wasn't that. It was like, you know what, come back. And I got married at 18, and then, at 19, my husband went to Germany. And so I went back to California and lived there for another year because he had to spend a year in Germany, and we didn't want to spend 3 years there.
Yeah.
So I came back for like 6 months, and then I went to Germany for like 45 days, and then came back again, and then we went to Hawaii for 3 years, and that's where Anthony was born.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, their love was always unconditional. And after having our kids, I think about how I ran away. That had to have broken my mom's heart, and you didn't have access to calling or texting saying, I still love you, or I'm still thinking about you, or I still wish you'd come home. But, I just...
How long did you run away from?
Well, I ran away and got married. So I graduated early from high school.
So you left? No, not that.
No, I called your Aunt Bonnie and, here's the story, and it's kind of crazy. Back then, too, you couldn't go online to make your flights.
Yeah.
So I knew that when I turned 18, I was going to run off and get married.
Yeah.
So I had booked my flight from the local travel agency in Huntington Beach. And my maiden name is not very common, Mezyk, M-E-Z-Y-K. And so my parents went in to book their flights to Chicago for Christmas. So the people at the travel agency say, oh, we just had somebody not too long ago book a flight to Texas. Are you related? And so then my parents knew that I had booked a flight to get out of Dodge and to go to Texas. And so when they came home, they said, I believe it was my dad, said, so you're going to be leaving, huh? And I said, what? And he said, yeah, they told us down at the travel agency that you have a ticket once you turn 18 to go to Texas. And I said, oh, yeah. And I think he was he was really hurt and spoke immediately, where normally that wasn't maybe my father's way. And he says, well, if you're going to go, you just might as well go. Oh, so me being, young and...
Did you cry immediately?
No.
We got up and left. This is your mom we're talking about. What you talking about?
Yeah, so I think the next...
So you packed your stuff and you're like, bye.
Well, no, I mean, it was in my brain. Okay, I'm leaving. Okay. Oh, so I think the next day my dad went to work, and I think maybe my mom went to work, and I called your Aunt Bonnie, and I said, I need a ride to Anaheim because I'm leaving. And so I had her...
So where were you living at this time?
Huntington Beach, but there was a bus that went from Anaheim to LAX. So I just had my sister drop me off in Anaheim, and then took the bus and got on a plane and flew to Texas. And so then that evening, my mom says to Bonnie, we need to go pick your sister up. She's probably at her friend Joanne's house. And Bonnie's like, no, Mom, she's gone.
And Aunt Bond didn't say it like that. She's like, she been gone.
She was probably like, yay, she's gone. We didn't really get along that great at that time in our lives. Yeah, that was all my fault.
And so at that time, how long went before you even rung your parents? Did you ring them pretty early on, or
I don't even remember, because we didn't have cell phones, so I would have had to make a collect call, or put a whole bunch of coins in a payphone. So I'm sure I contacted somebody within 3 weeks. So it was
Okay.
either one of my
Within 3
sisters.
weeks.
Yeah, either one of my sisters, or I think it was probably one of my sisters, and said, I'm fine, and, let Mom know I'm okay. But,
Yeah.
So that's the part that breaks my heart now. It's like, man, I put my mom through a lot, and, and kind of you think I put my mom through a lot, and in my mind it was for love, and in her mind it was like, you're a kid, what are you doing? And so so that was kind of it's terrible, but so
my uncles, your brothers, did they care?
I think that they were all doing their own things at the time.
They were older.
They were older,
Yeah.
right? And so then the first time that we came back, your dad and I with Anthony, they all showed up. So Aunt Peg and Uncle Dave invited us over, and so
Nice.
all the family showed up. I think there was some, hesitancy at first, should they or shouldn't they? And your grandma and grandpa weren't there. They were, in Huntington Beach at the time still, I think, or they were in Arizona. So, but the rest of the family was all there. And so it was a blessing, really. It was really a blessing. So we're very fortunate, because I know that some interracial couples maybe have had a lot more difficulties than we did. And it could have been a lot to do with, the size of your father, or the, his loud voice, or, he's kind of he had a presence about him no matter where he was at, so.
So fast forward, now we're all older. So you have me, Anthony, Allie. Because I'd like to know, where did the, I guess I would say, passion for us to play sports come in? Because some people may or may not know listening, I played soccer pretty much my whole life. I played volleyball, basketball. My sister did the same. She just did soccer. My brother played football, basketball.
Ran track.
But you guys, at what point did you and Dad have a conversation and sat down and were like, we think our kids can be something? Or where did, because sometimes me and Adam look at each other and we're like, oh, Matthias is athletic, but we're not concerned about D1 soccer. We're not concerned about D1 basketball or anything like that. Where because I've already lived that life and I'm good and I'm Gucci for my kids not to do it. But where were you guys because it wasn't common to hear kids going to D1. I didn't hear it growing up. So what did you and Dad, what would the conversation look like, and how did it come about?
Well, and I don't even think the goal was ever D1. I don't think that was the goal. I think it was to see a gift or a talent that your child has and then try to nurture it. So, your brother started playing soccer because that's what all little kids did, was played soccer. And like I said, we made a lot of mistakes. And, and I even shared with Anthony, several times probably within the last year or two, had we known more, we would have done more with better for Anthony, because Anthony was an amazing soccer player. But back then, all we knew about was ASO. And so when he was scoring all the goals on his team,
fastest one.
Yes, and when they picked All-Stars, they picked the coach's two kids. And he was like, oh, this is nonsense. I'm not playing this anymore. This isn't fair. And so he quit soccer, and we let him quit, even though he was really good. But had we more knowledge, we would have found a club team, which we didn't know anything about. And so it kind of worked that way with you. Once you were playing soccer, and Allie started the same time you did. So you were kind of late starting soccer. You didn't really start until you were 8 years old, and Allie was 4. So, but you were so gifted right from the beginning that by the time I think you were, 12, you were already playing club, because we're like, okay, she's better than all these kids on her rec team, so we need to do more for her. Same thing with college. Like when Anthony was graduating high school, we weren't pushing him to go to a college, even if it wasn't sports related, and he even played basketball in high school, but Anthony had cut his finger when he was young, and so he had this surgery when he was in high school that kind of, he's got a scar right up his arm from the surgery that was supposed to fix his finger. Well, the coach ended up making him do more lines, run, suicides, whatever you want to call it, even though he was out in the hospital recovering. We should have went in and told the coach, no, that's not, you know, that's not what it should be. But instead, you know, we find Anthony frustrated, and then he's like, I'm done.
Quit. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, hindsight, you know, I mean, I feel bad about that. But then, you know, with regards to all the teams that you ended up playing for, the pathway was, you know, if it wasn't D1, it was D2, it was NAIA, you know, even if it was the local, not anybody on your teams, but, you know, in the community, you know, you were like, if you can play, then keep playing and get part of your schooling paid for. So, but your dad was competitive. I mean, your dad, you know, played baseball, he played basketball, he ran track, he was an athlete. And so when he saw that in you guys, you know, I mean, it was easy to just say, this is
drill
fun.
it down.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But it wasn't cheap, you know, and so that's why I had to coupon. You know?
Got to pay for cleats and club and all that.
Yes. And the gas when we're driving, you know, 88 miles each way to soccer practice after 55 miles each way to work, that was a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
So there wasn't ever a conversation. You guys just knew. You guys were just like, because like, how did I come to Blast? Like, that was my first club team. Like, what conversations? Like,
Well, it was your friend Lacey. Lacey
Gotcha.
was joining club, and then they kind of were like, you should check this out too. And so that's what we did. And then from there, you just kept going where Lacey was like, yeah, I'll keep playing. And she did play, you know, in college and stuff, but she didn't make the jump to do the 88 miles each way drive, you know. So, so, you know, that's how you learn, right? We didn't even think to, you know, start investigating how do we, you know, cause our children to flourish in sports, you know. It was just.
But how do you keep someone grounded to for the reality of life? Because like for me and Adam, like we say, we could push Matthias and nurture that skill and gifting in Thomas. But how do you encourage someone to say, like, even if it isn't that, like mine and Anthony's life are completely different. And how as a parent did you nurture Anthony in those moments of not feeling maybe as successful as his sisters, or what did that look like?
Yeah.
Knowing that like there's so many family different dynamics where someone may be more athletic or someone may be more smarter. How do you as a parent nurture differently and make sure that every child is seen, even though they may be doing something different and making the child feel confident?
Right. Well, you know, and that part is hard because Anthony was a great athlete, you know, and so that's the part that I say that, you know, I feel bad about. That, you know, because there were times, too, that the coaches had favorites, and so that's what he saw, even in high school and, you know, in sports. And so there were times where he'd be so frustrated, and I was like, Anthony, you know, we just got to pray about it, you know. And so at a point he was like, Mom, is that all we're going to do? Is that all we're going to do is just pray about it? You know? And I was just like, that's all I knew to do, you know? But like I said, now it's like, man, I should have, you know, went out on a limb and tried to check these coaches, you know? But as a parent, you kind of feel like, oh, well, that's the coach's job. It's not me to intervene, because now parents intervene in a heartbeat, you know? So, but
They're super involved now.
Exactly. We weren't like helicopter parents back then. And, you know, I mean, I think, you know, when your brother was coming up, maybe they had a pager, you know, but they didn't have cell phones, you know? So, but I think that he, you know, definitely, you know, would have done so much more had I known more. And, you know, I think that he definitely has, you know, been successful in spite of it. You know what I mean? So, you know, we always let him know that he was loved. I mean, no matter what stage of life he was in, because, you know, he was 4 years older than you, or is 4 years older than you, and then 8 years older than Allie. So, you know, when Allie's 10 years old, just starting, you know, club soccer, Anthony's 18. He doesn't want to be bothered with, you know, a little brat, you know what I mean? So, but I think to always, you know, encourage him to know that he was loved and still loved. And then, you know, he went and got his degree as well. He didn't go to a 4-year university straight from, you know, high school. But there, too, as I shared with him, I was 18 when I got married. So I was out of the house before I was 18.
Yeah.
You know, my husband was out of the house. Your dad was out of the house when he was 17 because his mom signed the paper, joined the Army right out of high school. So he graduated in June. He didn't turn 18 until November.
Yeah.
So he was young like you are. Remember when you went to college, I used to have to sign papers for you because you were still 17 years old.
Yeah.
And so us being, you know, young, having Anthony, when he turned 18, we're thinking, oh, well, it's time for him to be an adult, you know. And so he went away to school, and then he, you know, lived with some friends for a while, and then he'd come back and he'd go live somewhere else and then come back. But, you know, thank God there were no boundaries there. He could always come back.
Right.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
great.
So after, we're good? Okay. So after that, I want to talk a little bit, because I was living in Chicago when Dad was diagnosed with cancer. Because it's a blur to me, and I'll be fully transparent. I don't feel like we ever talked about Dad having cancer. We just said he was sick. From what I can remember. Allie may remember it differently. Anthony may remember it differently. But I remember getting a phone call and you telling me, hey, Dad's sick. And I don't think we were ever discussed. For me, I don't ever know at what stage it was. I just, as a mom, as a wife, what were your thoughts and process when you found out Dad had cancer?
Well, there too, I think you're ignorant at first. You know what I mean? When somebody says you have cancer, you just think, okay, take it out, right? Mm-hmm. And so I didn't even realize initially that the cancer was marked at stage 4, because whenever a cancer goes from one spot to the next, metastasizes to another place, it's considered stage 4.
Yeah.
And so the reason your dad's was stage 4 was because this colon cancer had grown out of his colon and attached to his abdominal wall. So that's how big one of the tumors was, because there were 3. And so I don't think we even talked about it being stage 4 at the beginning, because we didn't really know. You know what I mean? They weren't saying, you know, this is, you know, the time frame that you probably have. It was like, we're just going to do this surgery. And your dad came through the surgery really well.
Yeah.
And so I don't even think that he really investigated it that much at that time, because he never seemed to fear the cancer at all. He trusted and believed for healing through the whole thing. You know, your dad had already been through what he was, you know, had gone through. So, you know, I don't think that we really, you know, started looking at a calendar, although I remember personally thinking we have to live each day with intention. Yeah. And that's how we should all live anyway, you know, because, you know, as you say all the time, and your dad has said it forever, you know, tomorrow's not promised to anybody. Yeah. You know, people get on the freeway and they don't get off. And so we should always all live with intention. And so that was what I tried to do with regards to your dad. So if somebody said, do you want to go to the movies? Sure. Do you want to go to the theater? Sure. Do you want to go on a cruise? Sure. Do you want to go to a ball game? Yes. Do you want to, you know, have a picnic today? Let's do it. You know, and it wasn't necessarily your dad saying that. It was other people inviting us. And so that's what we did, you know. I mean, and we lived a very blessed life even once he was diagnosed. I mean, you know, we did the cruise to Alaska, you know, and that was the desire of his heart, you know, and we did, like I said, go to the theater, and of course with the grandkids, you know, that was just, you know, the joy of his life, you know, to see the grandkids and spend time with them. So, but I think that that's a good lesson that we all need to keep in mind. That, you know.
So through those 7 years of him battling, what would you have said would have been the hardest in your marriage, just to encourage someone that may have a family member or someone that may have a sickness and they're trying to live by the vows and stay committed and uplifting their spouse and not giving up? And what was your hardest point, but what did you hold on to? And I know you'll say prayer, but what was something that kept you going to saying, that I'm by his side through it all?
Yeah. I mean, and that was really hard because he was so frustrated at times when it would come back, you know, and so I didn't have the answers, you know, and so I think that, you know, being there day in and day out, but there too, as a wife, you feel like you're never doing enough. What else can I do? What else can I do? And then there were times where, the doctor overprescribed him medication, and then we were in the hospital for 10 days for something totally unrelated that could have been prevented, and so we're dealing with that, and then the frustration, and, so, I can beat myself up, to say, I probably could have or should have done more, should have done something different, but I did the best that I could with what I knew at the time. So, I think for a wife or a husband whose loved one, or a child whose, parents might be going through, just try and be there the best that you can. Definitely pray. Try and see if there's something that you could do that can comfort them. But your dad was in a lot of pain toward the end, which was very difficult, and didn't really want to look at anybody or see anybody because it was just that hard. It was just that hard, even, with pain management and everything else. What we were doing to try and get, is it CBD oil? It's a THC oil? Is it,
the heating pad, the shots. Yeah.
Right. So, I think that anybody can, think that they were a champion through it, but that's not always the case. And then to dwell on it, it's like, well, Lord, forgive me for what I didn't do that I maybe should have done, or what I could have done better, but you just don't know at the time.
It's your first time. It's everybody's.
Yeah, and you're just trying to make it to the next day a lot of times, and you're writing down what he ate and what medication he took at this time and that time, and you see that journal and you're like, wow, this was our life for a while, you know what I mean? And but he was so strong because, to live 7 years with stage 4 colon cancer is pretty impressive, with 3 major surgeries and, everything that he went through. But, that was who he was too. He was a healthy man prior to this, he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't use drugs. He was a 6'5" athlete, never overweight, just, full of life and energy and fire,
lots of fire. Well, as we're closing, land the plane. What is something now, obviously, that we be considered a widow, for those of women or men that are going through this season of losing their spouse, of after the beyond I do, what is something that you have put at the forefront to keep busy, to live your life and be content?
I think that because once your father was diagnosed, it, becomes apparent that he may be totally healed from this and he may not. And so I was fortunate to have a really great support system in many areas. So, of course, having 5 sisters, that's a blessing. It's a blessing. And then having really good friends, to help walk you through is a blessing. And, and my brothers were, there for me as well. But then even during your dad's, cancer run, I was part of a water aerobics group. And so when your dad passed away, I must have gotten at least like 25 cards from the ladies from water aerobics, And I was already a part of a Wednesday Bible study in the morning, which I'm still a part of. And then a year or so after your dad passed away, I started a group with another woman who lost her husband. We have a Bible study for women who have lost loved ones. So most of us are widows, but some of the women have lost adult children. And so that's on Thursday nights. So, and then I've got the grandkids with sports. So I've got practices that I can go to. I've got their sports on the weekend. And then, of course, I picked up pickleball a few years ago. And so, so
6 days a week, pickleball.
Come on, 5 days. But I think that that's key if you can get a support system. So it's, other sisters in Christ, and they don't have to be widows. They could just be, friends, So that's why the neighborhood groups are so great, because you can be a widow in a neighborhood group and not everybody in there is widow,
right?
So I think that to have fellowship with other believers is key, and then I kind of have like a routine, just like I do with the kids, the grandkids when I drive them to school. I have a routine. In the morning, I kind of have a routine where I get up and do my prayers and my devotional and my sauna time and, drink my apple cider vinegar and lemon and, and then go play pickleball and, so then, get the Bible study.
Community.
Lots of community, and so I think that, and then just being a part of the church is amazing, because so many people will stop you, just to say hello, even if it's, but I think that's it. I think to have a great support group and, if you don't, then find one, and if you can't get out, then you have to try and reach out, even if you're somebody that you can text with. If you are unable to get out of the house, then find somebody that you can call. Matter of fact, I was really blessed because years ago I taught a Bible study at Abundant Living after Mother Rogers kind of put that Bible study aside. It was a Tuesday morning Bible study. It was at the Utica property. And so there were 2 or 3 other women and I that were teaching that on Tuesdays. But one night, Pastor Karen Coffey, she used to teach the Thursday night here at the campus. And so she asked me would I sub for her one Thursday night. And I only did it that one night. But I tell you, I met the most beautiful prayer partner who is still my prayer partner today, Michelle. And Michelle has 4 adult daughters, and they weren't all grown adults at the time because it was more than 10 years ago. I think it was before Allie even went to college, and she's been out of school for 14 years, I think. Or maybe out of college for 11 years. So anyway, God will set up divine appointments, and I just praise God for my, relationship with her where, we just know it'd be 6 a.m. in the morning because Michelle's going to get up early and I am too, and we'll pray and, and now, she has grandbabies, which she didn't before when we met. And, so there's so much that's good. And so you just got to find the good.
That's cool.
That's great. Thanks, Mom.
Absolutely,
I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here today and sharing for a little bit of your story and give a little context to the one who raised Ashley, on here. But thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a great week, however you're listening to this or watching this, and appreciate you joining us today.
Bye.
Bye.